Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
Today we're going to get into all about building better habits.
Right.
So we're going to be looking at the book Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah.
And we're going to sort of distill it down into some of the most essential and fascinating points.
Yeah, for sure.
You're going to learn things about like the power of tiny changes,
Yeah.
how your environment shapes your habits, and even some little tricks to make good habits stick. So
Can you be good?
it's all about getting those big results, but starting with those small, consistent actions.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's so exciting about Atomic Habits is that it's not just a list of like tips or tricks. It's really a deep dive into the science behind habits.
Okay.
So, we're not just talking about quick fixes here. We're talking about really understanding how to create lasting change.
I like that.
Yeah.
So, like, what is one of the most impactful ideas
Yeah.
that you think the book really drives home?
So one of the biggest takeaways for me is this idea of tiny gains.
Okay.
This concept of 1% improvement each day. Clear uses this really vivid example, like if you get 1% better each day for a year, you'll end up nearly 38 times better by the end of it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big difference.
It's the magic of compounding,
Right.
Think of it like investing small, consistent gains add up over time.
Okay.
The same principle applies to habits. You don't need to make these like radical changes overnight.
Right.
Just focus on those small improvements day after day.
So would you say like consistency is one of like the biggest takeaways from the book?
Absolutely. Consistency is key.
Okay.
And I think Clear's personal story really brings this point home.
Yeah.
After a severe injury in high school, he used these principles to recover and achieve some incredible things.
Now remind me what happened to him.
So he was actually hit in the face with a baseball bat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we're talking, broken nose, other facial fractures.
Oh my God.
Devastating experience.
Yeah.
But he didn't let it define him, He focused on small wins, consistently working towards his recovery, both physically and mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he says in the book, success is the product of daily habits, not once in a lifetime transformation.
Right.
Like those big sweeping changes are less likely to actually create lasting results than the small stuff we do every day.
Right.
Yeah.
So it really is a testament to the power of those small, consistent actions.
It really is.
So how can we put this into practice?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Well, Clear introduces this framework he calls the 4 laws of behavior change.
Okay.
Have you heard of these?
I have. I'm excited to dig into them a bit.
Awesome. So these are cue, craving, response, and reward. And they kind of create this feedback loop,
Okay.
a habit loop.
Got it.
So the cue triggers your brain to initiate a behavior.
Okay.
The craving is the motivation behind the behavior.
Okay.
The response is the actual action you take, and then the reward is the outcome, the benefit you get from performing the habit.
Okay, so it's not just about knowing these labels, right?
Right.
It's about understanding how to manipulate them to our advantage.
Exactly.
Right.
So let's take the cue, for example. Think about those high-calorie snacks you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If they're sitting out on the counter, they're a constant visual cue.
Yeah.
They're tempting you to indulge.
Right.
But if you hide them away in a cupboard,
Yeah.
you remove that cue,
Okay.
you make it less likely you'll snack mindlessly.
Makes perfect sense.
Right.
So it's like you're designing your environment
Exactly.
to make those good habits easier and bad habits harder.
Absolutely. And this concept of environment is a major theme in the book.
Okay.
Clear argues that our surroundings have a massive impact on our behavior.
So it's not just about willpower then?
It's not all about willpower.
Okay.
It's about being strategic with our environment
Okay.
to make those positive choices the path of least resistance.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me some more examples of how I can actually do that.
Sure. So if you want to read more, make sure you have a book easily accessible, maybe on your bedside table.
Okay.
If you're trying to cut down on social media, delete those apps from your phone
Okay.
or log out. So you have to go through that extra step of entering your password.
Right, so you're basically making those good habits as easy as possible,
Exactly.
and those bad habits more difficult.
Yeah. And to help with this, Clear gives us a simple but really powerful technique. He calls it the 2-minute rule.
I've heard of this.
Yeah. Have you used it?
I have. I find it's really good to get over that initial hump.
It's all about breaking down a new habit into something so ridiculously easy you can do it in 2 minutes or less.
Right.
So instead of exercise for 30 minutes,
Yeah.
it becomes put on your workout clothes.
Right, because once you've done that,
Exactly.
you're more likely to keep going.
Right. The idea is to overcome that inertia. That initial 2 minutes is about building momentum.
Yeah.
And often that's all it takes.
Yeah. I find that with so many things in life.
Yeah, for sure.
Like once you get started, it's easy to keep going. But
Yeah.
getting started is that hard part.
Absolutely.
Okay, so 2-minute rule, what's another one?
Another practical technique is habit stacking.
Okay.
So this is where you link a new habit to an existing one.
Okay.
So for example, if you always have a cup of coffee in the morning, you could stack a new habit like meditation or journaling right after you finish your coffee.
Right, so you're basically using that existing habit as like a trigger.
Exactly. You're leveraging those existing neural pathways in your brain.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. The existing habit acts as a trigger for the new habit, making it more likely you'll actually do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are some really actionable strategies.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating how we could use like these little tricks to make habit formation easier and almost like more automatic.
Yeah,
But what about motivation?
that's the big question.
How do we stay committed,
Mm.
especially when those initial bursts of enthusiasm kind of fade away?
That's where rewards come in. Clear emphasizes the importance of making good habits satisfying and bad habits unsatisfying.
Right, because our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Exactly. We're more likely to repeat behaviors that make us feel good.
Okay.
He uses this really interesting example from a soap study in Pakistan.
What?
Yeah, so they introduced this new soap called Safeguard,
Okay.
which had a more pleasurable scent and lather compared to like the regular soap.
So they made hand washing more enjoyable.
Precisely. And the result, hand washing rates increased significantly, and it led to improved health outcomes.
Wow.
So it highlights this power of associating positive feelings with the behaviors we want to cultivate.
That's really cool. So
Right.
it's not just about forcing ourselves to do something then.
Yeah.
It's about finding ways to make it genuinely enjoyable.
Exactly. And this is where creativity and self-awareness come in, you know?
Okay.
You need to figure out what kind of rewards truly motivate you.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the satisfaction of checking something off your to-do list,
Hmm.
or the sense of accomplishment after a workout, or the joy of learning something new.
Yeah.
There's so many different possibilities.
And even small rewards can be surprisingly effective, right?
They can be.
Clear talks about the power of visual cues, like marking an X on a calendar after completing a habit.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what is it about that that's so motivating?
Well, that visual representation of your progress can be incredibly motivating. It's
Right.
almost like a game, you know, a
Yeah.
visual reminder of your consistency and commitment.
Okay.
It also taps into this like deep human desire for progress and accomplishment. We
Ah.
all want to see that we're moving forward.
Okay, so it's like those little wins are fueling our motivation to keep going.
Exactly. Those small victories keep us engaged and excited to continue the journey.
Okay.
And I think that's a key takeaway from this part of our deep dive. It's not about achieving perfection overnight. It's about understanding the science of habit formation and using that knowledge to create a system that works for you. A system that makes those small, consistent actions easier, more enjoyable, and ultimately more rewarding.
Awesome. Well, we'll take a break and come back in part 2 to explore even more fascinating insights from Atomic Habits.
That sounds good.
Okay, so we're back and ready to kind of uncover even more kind of gems from Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
I'm really intrigued by this idea of like reframing our mindset.
Hmm.
It seems so simple, but yet it's like so powerful.
Yeah, it's about consciously choosing how we view a situation, you know?
Right.
Clear gives this great example about public speaking. You
Yeah.
know, so many people dread it. You know, they feel their heart racing, palms sweating,
Oh,
you know, all those classic anxiety symptoms.
I know them well.
Yeah, but what if we reframe those sensations, you know?
Right.
Instead of thinking of it as fear, think of it as excitement.
Okay.
Like your body's preparing you to deliver this powerful message.
Okay. So you're kind of like channeling that energy into something positive.
Exactly. And it's not just about positive thinking, you
Yeah.
know? It's about recognizing that our interpretation of events really shapes our experience.
Mm-hmm.
Clear even applies this to something like meditation.
Okay.
You know, it's normal for your mind to wander when you're meditating,
Oh, yeah.
but instead of getting frustrated, view each distraction as a chance to practice bringing your attention back to your breath.
Okay.
You know, so it's like turning those potential moments of frustration into these mini victories.
Right.
You know?
So you're strengthening that mental muscle.
Exactly. And it makes those distractions less daunting
Right.
and almost like part of the process.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And speaking of influences,
Okay.
let's talk about the impact of the people around us.
Okay.
Clear highlights this idea of social norms. you know?
Okay.
We are incredibly influenced by the habits of our family, friends, and even our broader culture.
Right. It's like that age-old desire to fit in, isn't it?
To what?
You know,
Yeah.
we see what other people are doing and naturally want to conform, especially within our own social groups.
Yeah, think about the example of smoking. You know,
Okay.
Clear describes how it often starts with one friend, then another friend tries it,
Yeah.
and suddenly it becomes normalized within that group.
Yeah.
The behavior spreads because of that social influence.
So it kind of works both ways, though, right?
It does.
Like if you surround yourself with people who prioritize healthy habits, exercise regularly or read often, you're more likely to pick up those habits too.
Absolutely. It's about consciously choosing who you spend your time with and what kind of environments you expose yourself to.
Okay. And that makes me think about the online world too,
Oh, yeah.
especially like social media.
Yeah.
If you're constantly bombarded with images of people living these seemingly perfect lives, it's so easy to fall into that comparison trap
Yeah.
and develop these like unhealthy habits trying to keep up.
Absolutely. And that's why curating your online environment, just like your physical one, is so crucial.
Right.
Unfollow accounts that trigger those negative comparisons.
Right.
Seek out content that inspires you and motivates you, and just be mindful of the messages that you're consuming.
Okay, so we've talked about reframing our mindset
Yeah.
and like being mindful of those social influences.
Right.
What are some other key takeaways from Atomic Habits when it comes to actually tackling bad habits?
Yeah. So Clear suggests making those undesirable behaviors as unsatisfying as possible. You want to associate them with negative consequences, even if those consequences are relatively small.
Right, so it's like you're kind of like tilting the scales a bit
Yeah.
so that the cost of that bad habit outweighs the benefit that you might perceive you're going to get from it.
Exactly. He introduces this idea of a habit contract.
Okay.
So this is where you formally agree with an accountability partner to face some specific consequences for slipping up. So maybe you miss a workout and you have to donate to a cause you disagree with or something.
That's a great idea. I like that.
Yeah.
It's like having that external accountability, even if it's just knowing that someone is tracking your progress.
Right.
Can be really motivating.
Absolutely. And beyond adding those negative consequences, you can also make those bad habits impractical,
Okay, yeah.
Like increase the friction involved.
Okay.
So if you want to reduce screen time, put your phone in another room.
Okay.
Delete those tempting apps,
Okay.
Make it less convenient to actually engage in those behaviors you're trying to avoid.
Right. So it's like building those little obstacles into your environment
Exactly.
to make it just a bit harder to fall back into those old patterns. Okay. So we've talked a lot about breaking bad habits, but what about maximizing the effectiveness of good habits?
That's a great question.
What does Clear say about that?
Well, he talks about the importance of finding the right kind of reward,
Okay.
especially for those habits that have more long-term benefits.
Right, because it's so easy to get caught up in that instant gratification, isn't it?
It is, our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Right.
So it's really tempting to choose that immediate dopamine hit over the delayed gratification of a healthy habit. So that's where some strategic thinking comes in. Clear suggests finding ways to inject a little bit of immediate pleasure
Okay.
into those long-term habits.
So it's about making those healthy choices a little bit more appealing, even if the main reward is kind of down the road.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's say you want to cook at home more often.
Okay.
Instead of just focusing on the health benefits, find ways to make that experience more enjoyable.
Okay. How would I do that?
Maybe listen to your favorite music,
Okay.
experiment with new recipes, or even host dinner parties with friends.
Right. So you're turning that chore into a social event.
Precisely.
Okay.
And the key is to find what works for you.
Yeah.
Maybe you reward yourself with a new cookbook after a month of consistent home cooking, or treat yourself to a fancy kitchen gadget,
Yeah. It's about aligning those rewards with your interests.
Exactly.
And what you actually enjoy doing.
Yeah, and this might sound a little counterintuitive,
Okay.
but Clear also suggests making good habits less satisfying occasionally.
How do you do that?
It's about introducing an element of variability.
Okay.
Think about those slot machines,
Right.
They keep people hooked with those intermittent rewards.
Right. So you don't know when you're going to win.
Exactly. That unpredictability, that surprise factor keeps things interesting.
Okay. So you're saying even with good habits, a little bit of variation can actually be beneficial.
It can.
Interesting.
Yeah, if you get the same reward every single time, it can start to feel predictable and less exciting.
Okay.
So shake things up a bit. Maybe one day you treat yourself to a fancy coffee after your workout. Another day you listen to a new podcast.
Okay.
And another day you just savor the feeling of accomplishment.
Right, so you're keeping it fresh.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between routine and novelty.
Right.
Keep those good habits fresh and engaging.
Yeah, okay, I like that. So it's really about finding that balance, isn't it?
It is.
Between that routine and novelty. And that's what keeps us going.
I think that's a great takeaway from this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Habit formation is all about understanding the underlying principles and then experimenting to find what works best for you.
Right.
It's not about following a rigid set of rules. It's about learning the science and then applying it in a way that fits your personality and your lifestyle.
Right, because everyone is different.
Everyone is different.
And what works for one person might not work for another.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into atomic habits. We've already uncovered so much, I feel like.
Yeah, a ton of great stuff.
I'm excited to see what else we can learn.
Yeah, well, we talked about finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Between challenge and ease when it comes to habit formation. Well, Clear formalizes this idea with something he calls the Goldilocks rule.
Okay, I was going to say not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly.
Just say it right. So how does that actually apply to building habits?
Well, it's about finding that optimal level of difficulty.
Okay.
If a task is too easy, we get bored, we lose interest.
Right.
But if it's too hard, we get overwhelmed and we give up.
Yeah, totally.
So Clear suggests aiming for tasks that are right on the edge of our current capabilities.
Okay.
That's where we find the most motivation and engagement.
It's like that saying, reach for the stars and you'll land on the moon, right?
Exactly.
Or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And this makes me think about those moments when you get totally absorbed in an activity.
Yeah.
What's often called like a flow state.
Exactly. When you're in flow, you lose track of time. You feel completely engrossed in the task at hand.
Yeah.
This usually happens when the challenge level is perfectly matched to our skill level.
Wow. Okay, so it really is about finding those challenges that stretch us just enough without breaking us.
You got it.
So what are some other strategies for building those lasting habits?
Well, Clear emphasizes the importance of identity-based habits.
Okay.
He argues that true change doesn't actually come from setting external goals, but from shifting our internal identity.
Okay.
Aligning our sense of self with those desired behaviors.
So it's not just about like wanting to lose weight or run a marathon.
Right.
It's about becoming the type of person who prioritizes health and fitness.
Precisely. You become the type of person who's a runner.
Okay.
You embody the identity of a healthy person.
Okay.
You start making choices that align with that identity, choosing nutritious foods.
Right.
Exercising regularly, prioritizing sleep. It becomes less about willpower and more about just living in alignment with who you believe you are.
Right. So the habits almost become automatic then.
Exactly.
An extension of your values and beliefs.
Exactly. And while goals can be helpful for providing direction, the real transformation happens when those goals become integrated into our sense of self.
Okay, it's like a mindset shift.
It is a mindset shift.
So once we've established these identity-based habits, how do we make sure we stay on track and continue to improve?
Well, Clear's a big proponent of reflection and continuous improvement.
Okay.
He suggests regularly reviewing your habits,
Okay.
tracking your progress, making adjustments as needed.
So are you saying it's not about being perfect?
It's not about perfection. It's about consistently striving to get better.
Okay.
He recommends actually scheduling specific time for reflection,
Okay.
maybe a weekly review where you assess, what's working, what's not,
Yeah.
and you brainstorm ideas for improvement.
That reminds me of that saying, like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again
Right.
and expecting different results.
Exactly. If we want to see real progress, we need to be willing to adapt and adjust our approach.
Right. It's about learning from our mistakes.
Exactly. And Atomic Habits provides a really useful framework for this ongoing process of self-improvement.
Okay.
It's not just a set of rules. It's a guide to understanding our own behavior
Okay.
and designing a system that supports our growth.
Well, I feel like we've truly extracted the essence of Atomic Habits in this deep dive.
Yeah, for sure.
What are your final thoughts?
Well, I think the key takeaway here is that building better habits isn't about finding a quick fix
Okay.
or relying solely on willpower. It's about understanding the science, being patient with ourselves, and embracing that journey of continuous improvement.
Right.
As James Clear writes, habits are the compound interest of self-improvement.
Okay.
The same way that money multiplies through compound interest, the effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them.
So it really is about those small changes adding up over time.
Exactly. Small changes lead to big results.
I like that. So dear listener, what's one tiny change you can make today to start building the identity you want?
That's the question.
Remember, even the smallest actions repeated consistently over time can lead to remarkable results.
It's true.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into atomic habits.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights and are inspired to start building those atomic habits for a better, brighter future.